For nearly a century, the American Mafia operated as a shadow government, with its own laws, its own courts, and its own form of punishment. We're counting down the 10 crimes that defined that reign, from a transatlantic heroin pipeline that poisoned a generation to a garage massacre that revolutionized forensic policing, from brazen public executions of sitting bosses to a single federal trial that dismantled the entire power structure. Each entry marks a turning point not just for organized crime, but for the nation itself. These aren't isolated mob stories. They're the moments that reshaped American history. We begin at number 10, where the Mafia's reach may have extended into the darkest, unsolved question in American politics. In the 10th place, the alleged Mafia and CIA link to President Kennedy's assassination stands as a symbol of enduring suspicion at the intersection of organized crime and state power. On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy was murdered in Dallas. In the years that followed, declassified CYA memos surfaced, referencing Task Force X and noting a high-level liaison with New York Mafia contacts during the era of Operation Mongoose. Yet these documents stopped short of naming individuals or outlining any operational order against the president. The 1979 House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded there remained a possibility of a conspiracy involving organized crime elements, specifically highlighting figures like Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante, but acknowledged that the evidence was fragmentary and often based on unverified or later recanted informant testimony. The consequences reached far beyond the courtroom. The unresolved questions and hints of covert collaboration between mobsters and intelligence agencies fueled a wave of public distrust. Calls for transparency led to the Church Committee hearings on intelligence abuses and the passage of the Presidential Records Act and Freedom of Information Act amendments, forcing federal agencies to open their files to unprecedented scrutiny. Within the underworld, the specter of political assassination prompted mafia leaders to retreat from direct attacks on public officials, shifting instead to economic intimidation and infiltration. No conviction ever emerged from the labyrinth of documents, informant statements, and legislative hearings. Yet the shadow cast by these allegations reshaped both law enforcement and the mafia itself. The event's legacy is less about a proven plot than about the lingering sense that American institutions could be penetrated, manipulated, or even steered by a criminal parallel government. The line between myth and reality remains blurred, but the aftershocks of suspicion continue to shape public life and federal oversight to this day. Number 9. The murder of Joey Gallo at Umberto's Clam House marked a turning point where mafia violence erupted into the public eye, shattering the code of invisibility that once protected the underworld. In the early hours of April 7, 1972, Gallo's 43rd birthday, the notorious Colombo family renegade was gunned down in the heart of Manhattan's Little Italy. The hit, carried out just after 4 a.m., as Gallo celebrated with friends and family, sent a shockwave through both the mafia's ranks and the city's consciousness. NYPD precinct logs detail the chaos that followed. Witnesses scrambling beneath tables, a volley of bullets, and the immediate arrival of police to a scene more reminiscent of a war zone than a restaurant. Gallo, known as Crazy Joe, had styled himself as both a media-savvy celebrity and a ruthless enforcer, making enemies across mafia factions. His assassination was not a discreet settling of scores, but a spectacle. Broad daylight violence that splashed across front pages and broadcast news. Within hours, Colombo family factions began retaliatory strikes, igniting a civil war that would claim dozens of lives and fracture the family's power structure. Grand jury transcripts from the months that followed recount a surge in factional murders, each more brazen than the last. As the organization struggled to reassert control, the fallout extended well beyond the Colombo family. The public nature of Gallo's murder undermined the Mafia's carefully managed reputation for discretion, drawing relentless press scrutiny and exposing internal divisions to law enforcement. The spectacle forced the mob to re-examine its operational strategy, leading to tighter internal discipline and a retreat from flamboyant public violence. In the wake of Gallo's death, the Mafia's shadow government found itself vulnerable, not just to the law, but to the destabilizing force of its own myth, now playing out on the stage of American popular culture. In eighth place, the Donnie Brasco undercover operation exposed the fragility of Mafia secrecy in an era when law enforcement began to adopt the Mafia's own methods of patience and infiltration. In 1976, FBI agent Joseph Pistone assumed the identity of Donnie Brasco, embedding himself inside the Bonanno crime family as a small-time jewel thief. For nearly 6 years, Pistone attended meetings, participated in shakedowns, and cultivated the trust of key figures like Benjamin "Lefty" Ruggiero. His undercover work was not a quick sting. It was a slow, methodical dismantling of the Bonanno inner circle from within. The operation ended in 1981, but the consequences for the Mafia were immediate and severe. The Bonanno leadership, blindsided by the revelation that a trusted associate was in fact a federal agent, responded with a wave of internal executions. FBI after-action files and indictment records show that more than 200 mobsters across multiple families were charged in the years following the operation. At least 13 Bonanno members were murdered by their own, each suspected of being compromised or having failed to detect the infiltration. The paranoia did not remain isolated. News of the breach sent ripples through all 5 New York families, prompting a climate of mistrust that undermined the Mafia's traditional reliance on loyalty and silence. The Brasco case did not simply bring indictments, it changed the rules of engagement. The FBI, encouraged by the operation's success, shifted its strategy from reactive raids to long-term undercover work, leading to the creation of new task forces and a generation of deep cover operations. For the Mafia, the lesson was brutal. The code of omerta could be penetrated, and the cost would be paid in blood. The Bonanno family never fully recovered from the internal purges, and the operation stands as a turning point, when the state proved it could outweight, outmaneuver, and outbleed the underworld on its own terms. Number 7. The Lufthansa heist at JFK Airport exposed the American Mafia's capacity for industrial-scale theft and the lethal lengths it would travel to protect its profits. On the night of December 11, 1978, a crew orchestrated by James Burke, known as Jimmy the Gent, infiltrated the Lufthansa cargo terminal with the help of corrupt airport insiders. In a span of just 90 minutes, the team bypassed alarms, disabled security cameras, and removed nearly $6 million in cash and jewelry, $5,875,000 in newly printed currency, and $875,000 in high-value gems were taken, making it the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. The planning was meticulous. Port Authority records and trial exhibits show that a combination of forged gate clear signals and inside knowledge of cargo schedules allowed the thieves to enter and exit the Gold Room vault without immediate detection. The loot was loaded onto a U-Haul truck, driven through a service tunnel, and split at a safe house in Queens. The operation's precision revealed a new kind of mafia crime, one that combined street-level ruthlessness with logistical sophistication drawn from the world of corporate logistics. But the heist's true legacy unfolded in its aftermath. As investigators closed in and rumors of informants spread, Burke initiated a wave of internal executions. NYPD homicide files and Henry Hill's later testimony tie at least 10 murders directly to the fallout from the job. Crew members, drivers, and even peripheral associates were systematically eliminated, each killing an act of preventative justice in the Mafia's shadow court, ensuring that no one could testify or claim a larger share of the take. Not a single participant was ever convicted for the robbery itself. The silence was enforced by blood. The Lufthansa heist forced a reckoning far beyond the underworld. Federal prosecutors cited the case as a catalyst for sweeping reforms in airport and port security, including the introduction of X-ray screening and canine units. The event also fueled a wave of public fascination, immortalized in films and books that transformed the Mafia's image from neighborhood enforcer to a shadow government capable of orchestrating crimes on a national scale. In the end, the Lufthansa heist stands not only as a monument to criminal ambition, but as a turning point when the pursuit of profit pushed the Mafia to consume its own, leaving a trail of bodies and a legacy of paranoia that would haunt the organization for decades. Number 6. The murder of Paul Castellano outside Sparks Steakhouse marked a public execution that sent tremors through the highest echelon of American organized crime. On the evening of December 16, 1985, Paul Castellano, the reigning boss of the Gambino family, stepped from a black Cadillac onto the sidewalk of East 46th Street in Midtown Manhattan. With him was his driver and underboss, Thomas Bellotti. In a matter of seconds, 2 gunmen approached and fired 6 shots at close range, cutting down both men in full view of rush-hour crowds and Christmas shoppers. The NYPD homicide file for that night logs the time of death at 5:26 p.m., and the incident triggered an immediate lockdown of the block, with investigators recovering spent 38 special casings scattered across the pavement. What set this killing apart was not only its brazen visibility, but the message it sent through the underworld. Castellano's murder was not sanctioned by the Mafia's ruling commission, a violation of the code that had previously governed internal discipline. Congressional hearings and FBI surveillance logs from the weeks before and after the hit document frantic phone calls among New York's other bosses, some demanding retribution, others seeking to avoid all-out war. Yet within days, John Gotti, who had orchestrated the assassination, took control of the Gambino family. According to NYPD surveillance notes and later grand jury testimony, Gotti watched the murder unfold from a car parked nearby, ensuring the job was done before stepping into the power vacuum himself. This was more than a personal vendetta or a settling of scores. Castellano's death decapitated the old guard, clearing the path for a new era of leadership that was flashier, less restrained, and more willing to challenge the commission's authority. The event was covered live by national news outlets, transforming the image of the Mafia from a secretive society into a spectacle of public violence. In the weeks that followed, the Gambino family underwent a rapid reorganization, with Gotti at the helm, and a wave of promotions and purges that solidified his grip. FBI memoranda from early 1986 described the killing as a seismic shift in underworld governance, noting that the Gambino's new regime abandoned the low profile that had shielded the organization for decades. The aftermath reverberated far beyond New York. The commission convened an emergency session to debate whether Gotti's unsanctioned coup could be tolerated, but ultimately, the sheer force of his power grab forced the rest of the Mafia to adapt. Congressional records from 1986 cite the Castellano murder as a catalyst for new anti-racketeering legislation and expanded federal surveillance of organized crime. The killing at Sparks Steakhouse did not simply end one man's reign. It shattered the old rules and ushered in a period of instability, media scrutiny, and law enforcement pressure that would define the Mafia's final decades as a parallel power in American life. Number 5. The Apalachin meeting raid shattered. The illusion that organized crime in America was a patchwork of local gangs. On the morning of November 14, 1957, a quiet stretch of rural upstate New York became the unlikely stage for a national reckoning. State Trooper Al Crescenzi, patrolling near the estate of Joseph Barbara, known as Joe the Barber, noticed a procession of luxury sedans, over 60 high-end vehicles crowding the roadside, each bearing plates from distant states. Sensing something amiss, Crescenzi called for backup. Within the hour, law enforcement encircled the property. As officers moved in, a wave of panic swept through the gathering. Nearly 100 men, bosses, underbosses, and capos from every major American Mafia family abandoned their breakfast and scattered into the surrounding woods and fields. Some fled on foot. Others reversed their Cadillacs and Buicks in haste, leaving behind coats, ledgers, and half-finished meals. Police detained 62 men, including figures such as Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino, but dozens more managed to escape in the confusion. The official New York State Police report cataloged the arrests, the cache of weapons, and the stacks of cash recovered from glove compartments and jacket pockets. Broome County arrest logs detailed the charges, mostly disorderly conduct and weapons violations, though most would be dismissed for lack of evidence beyond their presence. Yet the true impact of Apalachin was not measured in convictions. For decades, J. Edgar Hoover had dismissed the idea of a national crime syndicate, describing the Mafia as a myth. The events of that day forced an abrupt reversal. Within weeks, Hoover circulated a confidential memorandum to bureau field offices, acknowledging the existence of a coordinated national crime syndicate and ordering the formation of a dedicated organized crime division. The FBI's own internal files, previously focused on communist infiltration and interstate gambling, were redirected toward mapping the structure and governance of the so-called commission, a shadow board of directors that managed disputes, enforced discipline, and apportioned territory across the country. The Apalachin raid triggered a media frenzy. Headlines declared the end of plausible deniability. The Mafia was not a local nuisance, but a parallel power structure with its own rules and rituals, capable of summoning its leaders from Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, and New York for a single summit. Congressional hearings soon followed, probing the reach of organized crime into labor unions and municipal government. The shock forced law enforcement to abandon the fiction of isolated rackets and to embrace new tools, wiretaps, surveillance, and eventually, the RICO Act of 1970. Inside the underworld, the raid led to a new era of secrecy. Families banned large gatherings, instituted elaborate vetting procedures, and shifted from open meetings to coded phone calls and clandestine rendezvous. The Apalachin meeting raid stands as the moment the shadow government of the Mafia was exposed to daylight, forcing both the state and the syndicate to adapt. Its legacy is written not just in arrest records, but in the transformation of American justice and the enduring myth of organized crime as a force that could rival the institutions of the Republic. Number 4. The murder of Salvatore Maranzano marked the end of the Mafia's feudal era and the birth of a new governing order, one that would define organized crime in America for generations. On a September morning in 1931, Maranzano, who styled himself the boss of bosses, sat in his Park Avenue office, surrounded by the trappings of power. His reign had been brief but absolute. built on the old model of autocratic rule and enforced through a network of loyalists who answered to no one but him. But beneath the surface, resentment simmered among younger mobsters who saw the risks of centralized authority and the bloodshed it invited. At around 3 a.m, a squad led by Charles Lucky Luciano entered Maranzano's office under the pretense of a routine meeting. Within minutes, gunfire erupted. 2 men fired 38 specials, wounding Maranzano, while a third delivered a fatal shot to the back of his head. The assailants vanished into the Manhattan night, leaving behind a .45 Colt later traced to Luciano's crew. Police arrived within 10 minutes, sealing off the scene and launching a grand jury investigation. Yet, as the FBI Maranzano file and police blotters confirm, no one was ever convicted for the killing. The New York Times reported missing alien record paperwork on Maranzano just hours later, fueling rumors of a deeper cover-up and exposing how organized crime manipulated naturalization processes to shield its leaders from scrutiny. The consequences of Maranzano's death reverberated far beyond the walls of his office. In the weeks that followed, Luciano convened a clandestine summit with the surviving bosses. The result was the creation of the Commission, a board of directors that would mediate disputes, apportion territories, and enforce discipline across the country. The 5-family structure formalized in those meetings replaced the chaos of constant succession wars with a system modeled on corporate governance. The very language of the underworld changed. The title, Boss of Bosses, was abolished, and the phrase Cosa Nostra entered common parlance, signaling a shift from personal fiefdoms to a syndicate run by consensus. This transformation was not just internal. The Commission's emergence forced law enforcement to rethink its approach. The FBI, which had long dismissed the Mafia as a myth, began to map the syndicate's structure, laying the groundwork for later prosecutions. Meanwhile, the disappearance of Maranzano's naturalization records triggered a tightening of immigration controls, as federal agencies sought to close the loopholes that allowed organized crime to flourish in the shadows. Maranzano's murder stands as a pivotal moment, a single act of violence that dismantled an autocracy and installed a shadow government built on collective rule. The Commission would go on to arbitrate everything from labor racketeering to political bribery, operating as an invisible power alongside the state. The echoes of that September morning can still be traced in the files of the FBI, the minutes of the Commission trial, and the enduring architecture of American organized crime. Coming to the top 3, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre stands as the moment when gangland violence in America crossed from street-level vendetta into the territory of mechanized slaughter. On the morning of February 14, 1929, in a nondescript garage at 2122 North Clark Street, 7 men affiliated with Bugs Moran's North Side gang were lined up against a brick wall and executed in a hail of automatic gunfire. 2 of the assailants wore police uniforms, an act of tactical deception that, in less than 2 minutes, transformed a criminal rivalry into a scene of industrial-scale carnage. Over 160 spent shell casings littered the concrete floor, most from Thompson submachine guns fired in overlapping bursts. The autopsy reports, preserved by the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office, detail wound patterns that speak to the speed and precision of the attack. Each victim was struck between 5 and 12 times, with trajectories mapped against the workbench and loading dock. The aftermath was immediate and seismice. Dr. Herman Bundesen, the county coroner, convened a blue ribbon commission within hours, and the city's newspapers declared Chicago the gangster capital of the world by nightfall. Yet the evidence, casings, bullet fragments, and 2 Tommy guns, later traced to a Michigan hideout, never produced a single conviction, Informant testimony pointed to Fred Burke and Capone's trusted shooters, but the chain of custody for the weapons was broken, and the original gun barrels were destroyed in 1934 during a police purge. Later, payroll and uniform procurement records hinted at possible police collusion, but no names were ever attached to the uniforms purchased just weeks before the massacre. The shooters disappeared into the anonymity of the city, and the case entered the annals of unsolved American violence. What set this massacre apart was not only its brutality, but the way it forced the hand of the state. The public outrage was unlike anything seen before. In the weeks that followed, the Chicago Crime Commission was formed. Its first act was to publish a list of known mobsters, including Capone, as a warning to both the public and the police. Forensic ballistics entered the American legal canon in the wake of the massacre, with Lieutenant Calvin Godard's testimony on firearm markings establishing standards that would guide criminal investigations for decades. The scale of the violence, the sophistication of the operation, and the utter failure to secure a conviction shattered the illusion that the Mafia was a loose collection of street gangs. Instead, it revealed a shadow government capable of orchestrating its own form of capital punishment, immune to the reach of the law. The legacy of the St. Valentine's Day massacre reaches far beyond Chicago. Capone's dominance was cemented for the next 3 years, as the North Side Gang never recovered from the loss of its leadership cadre. The shockwaves traveled east, prompting New York's bosses to formalize their own governance structures to avoid similar bloodshed. In the broader sweep of American history, the massacre stands as an early warning of what happens when organized crime is left unchecked. Violence escalates, the state is forced to adapt, and the line between law enforcement and criminal enterprise grows dangerously thin. The garage on Clark Street became not just a crime scene, but a crucible for the modernization of American policing, and a grim reminder of the consequences when a parallel power structure is allowed to enforce its own rules. The French Connection heroin pipeline marked a turning point in American organized crime, reshaping entire communities through a flood of narcotics that spanned continents. From the late 1940s through the early 1970s, clandestine labs on the outskirts of Marseille transformed morphine base into potent heroin, destined for the docks of New York City. This was no isolated operation. It was a transnational cartel, with Gambino and Bonanno bosses collaborating alongside Corsican chemists and Sicilian brokers. The syndicate's reach blurred ethnic lines, forging a criminal alliance that operated more like a multinational business than a street gang. By the early 1970s, federal authorities estimated that nearly 80% of all heroin entering the United States came through this single pipeline. DEA seizure records and court documents point to over 1 million kilograms trafficked at the pipeline's peak, with only a small fraction intercepted. The real impact, though, unfolded far from the ports. In Harlem and the South Bronx, heroin overdose deaths quadrupled, rising from 3.2 to 12.8 per 100,000 residents between 1955 and 1972. Emergency rooms in New York City saw heroin-related admissions jump from about 1,200 in 1955 to nearly 10,000 by 1974, overwhelming public hospitals and igniting a public health crisis that would echo for decades. The devastation hit Black neighborhoods hardest. By 1970, Black patients made up nearly 60% of all heroin-related hospital admissions in New York, despite being less than a third of the city's population. Methadone clinics arrived too late and served too few, with new addictions outpacing available treatment slots by 3 or 4 to 1. Oral histories from Harlem describe blocks hollowed out by addiction, families fractured, and a generation of young men lost to overdose or incarceration. The heroin crisis, seeded by the French Connection, became both a weapon and a wound, reshaping the urban landscape in ways no gangland shooting ever could. Institutional complicity fueled the pipeline's success. Congressional hearings in 1973 exposed a pattern of bribery among port and customs officials in New York and New Jersey. Senate testimony revealed over $1 million in payoffs to union leaders and docker workers, ensuring Marseille shipments passed with minimal scrutiny. The infamous 1972 NYPD vault robbery, where 57 pounds of seized heroin vanished, underscored law enforcement's entanglement. Internal Affairs later named 4 officers who took bribes to ignore or facilitate heroin shipments, though only 2 faced charges. Even federal agencies were not immune. Declassified CIA memos confirm informal contacts with mafia intermediaries during the Cold War, sometimes trading operational awareness of smuggling routes for intelligence on communist activity. While no document directly ties the CIA to drug shipments, these blurred boundaries fostered a culture of impunity. Legislative responses lagged behind the crisis, with most federal drug enforcement funds going to interdiction and prosecution, while only a fraction supported addiction treatment or community health. The collapse of the French Connection pipeline in the mid-1970s, marked by high-profile indictments and the shutdown of Marseille's labs, failed to undo the damage. Many traffickers avoided long sentences through plea deals, and the infrastructure of addiction remained. The French Connection was more than a criminal enterprise. It was a shadow supply chain that delivered mass addiction, institutional corruption, and a legacy of suffering that outlasted any single gang war. In October 1985, federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York unsealed an indictment that named the bosses of all 5 New York crime families, Genovese, Lucchese, Colombo, Gambino, and Bonanno, as co-defendants in a single sweeping case. For decades, these men had ruled from the shadows, orchestrating violence, extortion, and labor racketeering through a clandestine board known as the Commission. The state, long stymied by the Mafia's code of silence and decentralized power, now deployed a new weapon, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO. This legal strategy allowed prosecutors to treat the Mafia as a single criminal enterprise, not just a loose network of individuals, an approach that targeted the very structure of organized crime. The trial, presided over by Judge Alvin K. Katz, began in earnest in October 1985. The prosecution's case drew on years of wiretaps, surveillance, and the testimony of insiders who broke the code of omerta. FBI wiretap exhibits captured the bosses in parking garages and back rooms, discussing territory, settling disputes, and deciding the fate of those who crossed them. Surveillance photographs documented briefcases of cash changing hands, while phone recordings linked the commission directly to the murder of federal informants. Each piece of evidence reinforced the reality that the Mafia operated as a national syndicate, one capable of shaping industries and dictating terms to unions, politicians, and law enforcement. On November 19, 1986, the jury delivered its verdict. 8 of the 11 defendants were found guilty on all RICO counts. Sentences were severe. Anthony Salerno, known as Fat Tony, Anthony Corallo, known as Tony Ducks, and Carmine Persico each received 100 years in federal prison, effectively life terms. The convictions shattered the myth of Mafia invincibility. For the first time, the state had not just clipped the branches, but struck at the very root of organized crime's power structure. The courtroom became a stage for the final act of the old order, as the bosses who once commanded armies of killers were led away in handcuffs, their reign ended by the very laws they had long believed did not apply to them. The consequences stretched far beyond the prison sentences. The commission trial validated the enterprise theory of RICO, setting a precedent that would be used in every major organized crime prosecution that followed. The government's victory signaled to the underworld that the era of untouchable bosses was over. The five families, stripped of their leaders, fractured into warring factions, and lost their grip on unions, construction rackets, and political machines that had once made them indispensable power brokers. Treasury agents, empowered by the Mafia Fund, Freezing Act of 1988, moved quickly to seize assets linked to racketeering, draining the syndicate's financial lifeblood. Public perception shifted. Televised courtroom coverage and nightly news summaries demystified the mafia, revealing its inner workings to millions. The trial's reliance on insider testimony broke the code of silence, emboldening a new generation of informants and witnesses. Congressional hearings followed, expanding asset forfeiture laws and strengthening federal oversight of organized crime. The shadow government that had once rivaled the institutions of the Republic now found itself exposed, outmaneuvered, and, for the first time, genuinely vulnerable. The commission trial stands as the moment when the state delivered its own version of justice, one that matched and ultimately overcame the mafia's century-long reign of violence and secrecy. The legacy of the trial endures in every RICO prosecution, every asset seizure, and every shattered code of silence. The American Mafia, once a parallel power structure capable of shaping cities and silencing enemies, was finally brought under the rule of law. Across all 10 crimes, one pattern stands out. The Mafia did not simply break laws. It created an alternate system of order, discipline, and retribution that rivaled the state itself. Each act of violence redrew the boundaries of power, leaving permanent marks on American institutions. Even now, echoes of that shadow government linger in law, politics, and culture. The true legacy is not just bloodshed, but a nation forever altered by its own hidden rulers.